Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "We have art in order not to die from reality." This might seem like an exaggeration, but is it really? How much of your day do you devote to watching television or reading a book or scrolling through social media to find something that sparks an emotional response? Listening to music? All of these are forms of art, and it's impossible to imagine life without them. For this podcast, I plan to talk to creative people from all mediums about their creative process, and also about why and how creativity is important to the culture of America. Welcome to the Song of Roland, American Culture at Full Volume.
My father died when I was still in high school, right about the time Miss Darling deemed me an ornithologist. Nowadays, my father, if alive, could probably call up one of those omnipresent lawyers on TV promising settlements against people working against asbestos or Boy Scouts or talcum powder. It's true that he probably succumbed to being in daily contact with carcinogens. My father, long before it became a term, liked to label himself an essential worker. He claimed to save hundreds of lives daily, especially with hemophiliacs. If it weren't for my position as Southern skeptic, there's no telling how many people would bleed to death after shaving, he said. As a head of quality control, my father's job was to nick himself a few times per day, ends of fingers, up his forearm, down his calves, all over his face, with what might now be considered vintage safety razor blades, Jim Blue Stars, Wilkinson swords, Gillette blue blades, Treats, Lion blue blades. Then he'd lick the end of a styptic pencil and staunch the open wound. He might have been at the forefront of all those kids who ended up self-harming themselves right around the turn of the century. He died of blood cancer, of course.
George Singleton is a Southern writer who, in the tradition of Flannery O'Connor, has become a master of the short story. He's published 8 story collections, with the latest being The Curious Lives of Nonprofit Martyrs, published by Design Books. Singleton has been the recipient of many literary awards, and he lives in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where he retired from teaching at Wofford College. You're looking a lot shaggier.
I'm in my Howard Hughes phase. I've given up since COVID in 2020. I've just given up, I think I've had my hair cut once. Now, maybe twice since 2020. It's time to get another one.
Still teaching?
No, I hadn't taught.
Okay.
I haven't taught since COVID. First of all, COVID hit, and I taught for a few months remotely, and then I got pulled into the provost's office, and he said, "There's been a complaint about you." And I went, "Yeah, of course there is." There were a million complaints, but one was I gave an A- to a kid who thought he deserved an A, and he was a state senator's son. That's it for me, I've had it for these daggum whatever.
Yeah.
What else? There were a million things that happened. I was teaching this course called Grit Lit, Contemporary Southern Literature. So it's like Barry Hannah, Harry Crews, Dorothy Allison, and of course some of these students' parents had said, "Let's see what you're reading." And they went, "Oh boy, there are a lot of cuss words, and there are drugs, and they're drinking a lot." And the provost said, "You have to figure out something new to teach." And I said, "This is what you brought me in for, fiction writing class, and this. Well, you got to figure out something else." And I just said, there were a lot of F words involved, but I said I quit. I came home. Glenda said, "What was that meeting about?" And I said, "I quit." And she said, "Good." And I was going to quit the next year anyway. I was 62 at the time, so I only needed a half a year to get Social Security, which I'm supposed to get tomorrow, but probably won't show up because of Musk. You know,
Yeah. It's crazy what's going on.
it's scary.
Yeah.
By the way, listen to this, Russell. We're about to get snow tomorrow for 4 hours.
Oh
And
my
it's getting
God.
like 38 degrees and raining. I know y'all are getting like -2 and -19 or whatever. I just looked because I have fun doing this. I looked in buildings and it was two. It was 2 fucking degrees. So we're all ready to go out and buy bread and milk right now.
So let's dive in with the I loved your collection. And one of the things I liked about your writing a lot is that you address a lot of serious issues, but you do it with humor. And I'm just curious, was that kind of your style from the beginning, or did that develop over time?
No, no, I'm an idiot. You know, I I started really taking writing. I mean, I got really I'm not sure I was serious about it, but I was obsessed in college, right at the end of college. I was making really good grades, Russell, until my senior year in college when I was just up all night writing. And I was writing, excuse me, slapstick. And slapstick's fun to watch on TV. Like you watch your Three Stooges, Mo hits Larry with the frying pan and Mo pokes Curly in the eyes with his fingers. And that's funny. But on the page, it's not very funny at all. So I was writing that crap. And then somewhere along the line, you mentioned this in one of your emails. It was Flannery O'Connor, I think, where I went, maybe I should be a little bit more serious. Things can be funny. Samuel Beckett said, "There's nothing funnier than human misery." He wouldn't be mean. He goes all the way back to Aristotle. Oedipus stabs his eyeball, kills his father, has sex with his mother, and stabs his eyes out. And we go, well, that ain't funny, but and that's bad. But at least it's not my life's bad, but it's not like that bad. So I started trying, and to this day, I think as years go on, I'm old now. I'm trying to write stories that are funny and sad at the same time. And there's nothing better for me than to be doing a reading in public and people are laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing. And then out of nowhere, they go, uh-oh, this is sad. Maybe I shouldn't have been laughing all that time. And I kind of go, I win. So no, it's been years and years and years, 40 years of trying my best to just write a story that'll make you laugh and cry at the same time. My father believed that the throwaway shaving industry not only killed him, but also America. He believed that those plastic-handled Bic razors, mass-produced wherever, killed not only his business, but also the need for young men to understand a need for danger. He said it had something to do with France. I've never looked up anything about this, but I knew that my father made me study Spanish in high school instead of French. Those might have been my father's last words to me in a hospital room. Spanish is going to be your way on your way to go, etc. I can't say he was wrong. In the world of nonprofits in America, I need to know Spanish way more than I need to know French. Hola, dame algo de dinero. Gracias. Adios. My father said, Roger, look, if people are able to not worry about slicing their jugulars, what's next? They drive around in cars, not worrying about running out of gas. I was a kid, standing there in the hospital. The doctor came in and said to my father, well, my father said, God damn it, how did I get this thing? The doctor said, have you never eaten liver? I swear, what did this small town doctor think? That eating liver prevented blood cancer? Even when I was 16, I knew that this wasn't any kind of diagnosis. My father said, I eat liver all the time. There's your answer, said the doctor. I know that it's short sighted and petty and wrong headed on my part, but I've chosen never to work for the nonprofit Doctors Without Borders because of this one experience.
You really do focus mostly on short stories. I know you've written a couple novels that were published, but stories are your strength. And can you explain how that evolved? Is it just because you love them, or
No. When I was in college and started writing, I wrote this bad novel, it, this bad manuscript. It was 450 pages. And then I wrote another one. It was in third person. Then I wrote another one that was 250 pages, third person. Then I wrote another one that was 300 pages, third person. And then I went off, I got a job teach. I'd gone through college and started an MFA program. Then I had to go back and run my dad's business because he got sick and died. And then I went back to MFA program. I don't know how many, well, I know I had three professors say, it's going to take 1,000 pages before you're ready. And I was like, you idiot. I'm smart. I was just this punk kid. So if you add up 450, 250, and 300, it comes to 1,000 pages. I started teaching, and listen, Russell, I'm not one to say, ooh, teaching so hard. I'm never that person. Whenever I hear a professor say, teaching so hard, I go, hey, man, you ever roofed? You ever put on a roof? You ever like dug a ditch? You ever driven a garbage truck? You ever done any of these things that kind of I've done? Shut up. So, but I was teaching four classes of English 101. There were 25 students in a class. They each had to write 10 final drafts. It took a lot of time grading. I mean, it just took a lot of time. And by this time I was reading more short stories. And I went, I'm gonna try that. So I started writing short stories and I had some luck. Now I had the luck because I'd kind of found a little bit of a voice. Um, those first three manuscripts, I didn't even know how to send them out. I was so stupid. I'd kind of finished one. I knew like around page 200, boy, this stinks. But I'd plow on, and then pick a minor character out of the previous novel and write a novel, whatever. They were bad, but then I really kind of fell in love with short stories. And I know I've said short stories are harder to write than novels. I don't think they're harder to write. I think it's just harder to write a really, really good novel. I think it's for me, it's impossible. And Randall Jarrell, the great poet, said the chances of writing a perfect poem are about the same as sitting in a lounge chair in your front yard and having a meteor fall on your lap. And I believe that's true when you think about the great poets of all time, Yeats or Eliot or something. You go, yeah, Yeats, 12 great poems. He wrote a million, but 12 great poems. And so it's easier, I would imagine, to write a perfect short story. I've never done it, but it's easier for me to sit down and go, okay, this might be the one. You know what I mean? With novels, I'm just kind of like meandering around and, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next. So let me add another character in here. And, I'm an idiot about that. I'll never write another novel. I can guarantee you. And I've had the luck of having, I had an agent one time. She's a great, kind of a big time agent. And she did me well. And she did about 4 or 5 books. Finally, I said, okay, I got a new collection. And she said, George, I'm not going to try to sell another collection of your stories until you write a novel that I like. And I said, Liz, you've never really liked anything I've written, as far as I can tell. I'm going to continue writing short stories. And I swear to God, Russell, she said, well, I hope you have a good life. And she hung up on me. And I went, God dang, man. So I found publishers, Dzank is one, that have never, ever said, hey, write a novel. So that's good. Be like if I wanted to be if I were an electrician and someone kept saying, be a plumber, be a plumber, be a plumber. I don't want to be a plumber. I want to be an electrician. So I want to be a short story writer.
So I wanted to talk to you about the Southern writer thing because I've been a huge fan of Southern writers pretty much since I discovered O'Connor, but I also loved, like when found Carson McCullers, I just devoured everything she ever wrote. But I've never quite been able to put my finger on what it is that distinguishes Southern writers from others. Other than that, I think most of them have this humor in common with you. Is there anything else that you've thought about or noticed
I've read,
that's
I've, you know,
different?
I've read stuff like Southerners are so upset about losing the Civil War, and they got a chip on the shoulder. Uh, I've never written about the Civil War. I don't give a damn about the Civil War. I mean, I just don't. I was brought up. My father was born in Texas and ran away from home at age 16 and joined the Merchant Marines, uh, and was in a union. He, of all things, he only had a 10th grade education, but when I was a kid, we didn't read. There wasn't a bookstore in my hometown, and it wasn't really much of a library. It was about the size of this room I'm in. He said, I want you to read these books. And one was Socialism by Emil Durkheim, and one was The Communist Manifesto. I'm no commie or anything, but I kind of know Workers of the World Unite. And I think in Southern writing, it's, Workers of the World Unite. You're trying to do the best you can with what you got and get over it. And unfortunately, a lot of my characters ain't got a lot, but they're trying. They're trying to figure things out. I also think that the Southerners come from a long line of storytellers and liars. And fiction is lying. So that's it.
It's your dad, because he had a pretty interesting story with that horrible accident he had, and then it sort of seemed to kind of derail him a little bit.
He had a rough life. He was born in 1925 in Dallas. He ran away. This is going to be the biggest white trash story I'm going to tell you. He joined the Merchant Marines in 1960. He got testicular cancer, and he was in the hospital for a long time, like off and on for like 18 months. And then he was cured, and he went back in the Merchant Marines, and then he fell 45 feet into the hold of a ship when the ladder kind of broke. And then he was in the hospital for a long time after that. He broke 57 bones, and he became a morphine addict, and then a Darvon, and some other drug, I forget. Darvon was a big one. Then he drank like crazy, like a quart of vodka at a time. I mean, and so he was a little bit, I don't know. I mean, I love my dad a lot, but problematic, I guess would be the word to say. He could be really mean But now that I look back at it, he was just in pain, he told great stories. He told them at inappropriate moments. I'll tell you this story. One time, I brought my girlfriend, Kathy, to meet my parents. I was maybe a junior in high school. And my father said, "Hey, Kathy." My father's walking with a cane at this time. And she said, "Hey, Mr. Singleton." And he said, "Hey, you want to hear about the time I cut off a man's thumbs?" Dad. And the story was he was working a crane in the Merchant Marines. He's picking up pallets of lumber on the West Coast and putting, I guess, up in Washington State and putting them in the hold of a ship. And he's this college guy. He had his hands on the cables around where this, big pallet was. And he was yelling at my father, "Hurry up, Singleton, hurry up, hurry up." And my father yelled down from the crane. The crane, I don't know if you've been on a merchant ship, it's way up there. He's like, "You might want to move your hands." And the guy was just cussing out my father. And my father lifted up the gauge or whatever, and the cables became taut and cut off the guy's thumbs. So he thought it was the funniest thing in the world. If you look over my 14 books or whatever, I have a lot of thumbless people that show up in my books just from that. My father, he died when I was 23 or 24. And one time I was living in DC for a little bit, and he used to call me up a lot in the middle of the night. Or no, he'd call me up at 5 a.m. And a lot of times I was just coming in from bars. And I go, "Hello," landline. And he'd go, "I'm looking at normally you'd say, I'm looking at the want ads. I don't see philosopher for hire," because I was a philosophy major, so he made big fun about that. But one time he called me and I'd hidden that first manuscript that I wrote. I'd hidden it in our basement, way back in a drawer of a desk that was back there. My father had found it and he called me up and he started reading from it. And I just thought, well, this sounds a little bit familiar. And then I realized he was reading from what I had written. And he went, "That's not how it happened, though." And then he told, because I was stealing from him, I was just stealing his stories. Anyway, he and I certainly made up by the time I was about 18 and 18 to 24. He got a little bit sappy there for the last few years of his life. I mean, there's a lot of "I love yous," and it was different from him hit me on the back of my hamstrings with a cane whenever I did something wrong. You know, he's just volatile. But then, I've written about how I have right over there. I'm pointing at it. I have two of his ex hips on my
You still
desk.
have,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
and but hips have come a long way, and there at the end, I went to a Baptist college, and I didn't get along real well there, and I went to go study in France for a long time, and actually got a job in France after my semester, and I talked to my mom on the phone, and she said, "You need to come back home. You can't get that job." And I came back. My dad got one more hip operation in 1979. He died in 83. And it was so good he didn't have to use a cane, crutches, or anything. He could walk. He didn't limp. I mean, and then it didn't. And then he died of lung cancer, and he never smoked. It's probably asbestos from the Merchant Marines.
What killed my dad too.
Really?
So yeah, he was a Navy guy. So yep. So my dad was an alcoholic too, and I've often wondered, there was a lot of uncertainty in our life. He was always changing jobs, and I've often thought, well, maybe he kind of accidentally prepared me for the life of a writer, because there was there was no certainty, no stability there, and so I've often thought about that.
My father I was born in Anaheim, California, and
Hmm.
lived there for 7 years. So my dad was most of the time he was sick. He either had the cancer or he had the hip thing. And then his father lived in Greenwood, South Carolina, and I got all kinds of stories to tell. And then my grandfather said, "Hey, why don't you move here to South Carolina? You can work for me under the table. I'll pay you under the table." It was a textile supply company. So my father said, "Okay." I don't really remember this trip that much. I don't know how my father drove all that time from California to South Carolina with his hips, but we did. Um, we stopped in Dallas to see his biological mother. Her name was Nelta, and Nelta played honky tonk piano at a burlesque venue owned by Jack Ruby, the guy who killed Lee Harvey Oswald. And we got there. I was 7, and it was August. It was really hot. She was wearing a fur of like one of those dead fox around her neck. And she said, "Little George, the Easter Bunny left you something." And she pulled out one of those cardboard and cellophane boxes that has a chocolate Easter Bunny. It had turned white by this time, April, May, June, July, August. And she had gnawed the head off of it. And I went, "Okay, thanks." And I know I just looked at it. My father said, "What do you say?" And he hit me with his crutches at the time. And I went, "Thank you, Grandma." But anyway, we got to South Carolina. My dad started working for his dad, making these little things. I wish I'd have brought one show and tell called replacement belts or replacement aprons that go on a spinning frame for yarn to run on so it doesn't snag on metal. And they got in a big fight. They got in an argument. It had to do with church. My grandfather fired my dad. My dad was getting $180 a month for, Social Security or whatever for disability, which I was an only child, but 180 bucks a month, even in 1965, ain't a whole lot of money. So my father delivered newspapers. He did all this other crap. He ended up starting up a company that competed with his own father's company. It was in my mother's name. And then my grandfather later tried to kidnap me from school. That's a long-winded story. This is all the Southern crap, Russell. I mean, this is where I get my stories.
Have you been in South Carolina that whole time then?
Well, you see, I lived there from 7 to 18. 18 to 22, I went to college in South Carolina. 22 and 23, 24. Now, then I moved to Washington, D.C. to go to this school in D.C. or in Fairfax, Virginia. Then my dad got sick and I had to come back. And I ran his business. And it was a one-man operation. It wasn't, and I knew how to run the business because my father was paranoid that Social Security is going to show up one day. So as like a 13-year-old, I was always having to hang out in this. You got to pretend like you're working, among these machines that would cut your fingers off, like a splitting machine, 13-foot band butt blade and all that. I lived in Greensboro for 2 years to get an MFA. And that was it. I lived in Florence, South Carolina, Darlington, South Carolina, back in Greenville. Now I live in Spartanburg. So, yeah, I'm kind of, you
Pretty
know,
much.
out of 66 years, I think I've lived, well, 7 years. I lived in California, and then maybe another three, two and a half out of state.
So what makes South Carolina different from the other southern states, or is there anything?
I'm not sure there's anything. South Carolinians who read my work think I'm making fun of South Carolina,
Mhm.
and maybe I am. People from other states, if I'm up in Iowa or Oregon, they don't think that. They all ask me if I'm a Southern writer, And I go, well, what the hell, you know? Where, what? No, I'm an Inuit writer. I mean, yeah, of course I'm from the South, you know. I think they want to ask me if I'm gonna get drunk and act fool, you know, and
Yeah.
like talking or something. South Carolina is kind of beautiful in that there are beautiful mountains and there's a really beautiful coast. I mean, Charleston, Beaufort, Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach is a little bit tacky, but it, you know, the beaches are beautiful. It's real red. It's a real red state. But Montana is too, you know. Hell, too many places are. Are and people make fun of the South. You know, when I go to Mississippi, like on book tour, the most well-read people I know are in Mississippi. You know, and there are well-read people in South Carolina. And there are also people who are not well-read, but
Yeah.
what the heck? That's where I get my stories, is the people who are not well-read. You know, tell me a story.
So I did want to talk to you about the way you present your characters because it feels like so much of your stories do present people that are kind of struggling, but it doesn't ever feel to me like you're making fun of them as so much as you're just trying to convey how difficult life really is in America for a lot of people. And so I'm curious about your take on how it is because you also have a real nice way of pointing out the a lot of the failures of American culture in a subtle way in your stories, and I just wanted you to address the how you see writing as a way of sort of pulling away the layers and taking a real honest look at what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do that very well, but you know, I think if there was a cartoon of my stories, it would be some guy scratching his head like this all the time. Um, you know, I don't know. Most of my main characters are college educated and just trying to figure out what the heck is wrong, what's going on around here, you know? And they're nice to other people of all walks of life, I hope, but just can't figure it out. And, you know, and that's kind of how I am right now. I just can't figure things out. I'm going, you know, someone asked me the other day about, boy, you're going to be living large here in this new administration. And I went, no, I'm not. I write kind of absurdist comedy, and everything's so absurd now, I can't compete. You know what I mean, golly, all these people who voted for someone who's saying, oh, you know, want to make things better, and then he fires everybody. So I don't have a good answer to that, Russell. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think what you're kind of getting at is sort of what I was trying to pursue is this the fact that you a lot of your stories really do convey that the fact that no matter how successful people are or how much they're struggling, we're all just sort of trying to figure it out, and it's all very overwhelming sometimes, right?
I would hope that my main characters are saying, we're all in this together. Let's just
Hmm.
figure it out, be nice to each other. And I don't want to be Pollyanna about that, but boy, oh boy, you know.
So what's it like trying to do that in a red state these days?
Well, you know, I learned. It took me a little while to learn this. It's hard to write about, or maybe wrong, to try to write a story that has to do with politics with a character who's adamant about here's how things should be and here's what's wrong, because it's a little bit didactic and you know, people don't want to read that. People don't like being preached at. So what I'd rather do is have a character just you know, just minding his or her own business, and someone, blah, you know, starts yelling at them, and that character is going, whatever, leave me alone. I'm not the. I shouldn't say this. Well, I'm gonna say it. I ain't really a Christian, but I do believe in stuff like do unto others. Uh, I just kind of believe that, and I hope my characters are going do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. You know.
Struggle with substance abuse yourself, like your dad did?
Oh yeah, I drink like hell. I haven't done any drugs since I was 30 years old, though. Now, one of those questions you wrote me earlier was, are you glad that you didn't get a book come out until you're 40? Yes. Because if I were 25, I would have bought more cocaine than you'd believe. I am proud of that, but that's just the way things were back then. I don't know what I was doing cocaine because I couldn't even afford it. Um, I never really smoked a lot of pot because it makes me sleepy and paranoid. I've never done heroin or LSD or anything like that, but I drink like a fish. And I've also, I've done rehab, but I quit for like 18 months at a time, and it comes and goes. Not happy or proud about that, but it's easier for me to write when I've had a bourbon or two.
I was 42, I think, when my first book came out, and
Me
it was a
too.
good thing. Yeah, I would have been so full of myself if I had
Oh
gotten
yeah.
published earlier.
Yeah, I was enough full of myself at age 42. My first book came out when I was 42 also. And I was enough full of myself and going off on, book tours and stuff. But, somehow I lived through it now.
You got published in the Atlantic a few times, is that right?
Yeah.
Was Michael Curtis there when you did that? When you were
Michael Curtis lived 2 miles down the road from where I'm sitting right now. You
what?
know, his wife got a job at Wofford College, where I later got a job. And so Michael and I were buddies. He passed away during COVID. I visited him a lot in the hospital wearing a mask. I loved him dearly. He gave me shit. I mean, he gave me crap all the time. He would send me rejections that went, it's exactly how he talked, Russell. I swear he goes, you know exactly where to start a story and get it going, but you have no idea how to end the story. Okay. I think I've had 4 or 5 stories in the Atlantic. He was a great editor. We played poker a lot together. He was a great poker player too. Anyway, yeah, yeah, I miss him a lot.
We have this connection because I did an internship under him
Really?
when I was in graduate school in Boston. I did an internship at the Atlantic, and he was the nicest guy. And he would take me to lunch every now and then, and just talk writing with me. He was so generous that way.
He
And
was a funny guy. Oh, go ahead, go ahead. I'm
he
sorry.
actually offered to try to help me get my first novel published because I showed him the first few chapters of it, and he sent it out to some of his editor buddies, and nothing ever came of it. But the fact that he was willing to do that just meant so much to me. It was a huge boost for my confidence.
He's really generous. I have some stories like one time. He lived in this gated community called Carolina Country Club, and I live on Carolina Country Club Road, but I don't live in the country club. But he called up one day and he goes, "Do you have a chainsaw?" And I went, "Yeah, I got a chainsaw. Could you come over and cut some of my limbs? And I went, "Okay." So I went over there and started cutting limbs on his trees that were right on the property line of his neighbor. And the neighbor came out, this woman, and she went, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Mike, are these trees yours?" And he goes, "I don't know." You know.
Great.
And then he went, it's like kind of crap loaded tree limbs, like Leland cypress limbs. And he went, and I had a pickup truck, so he went, "Can you take these to the dump?" And I went, "Man, come on, I got things to do. Don't you have somebody in this gated community who comes and picks this crap up?" Okay, okay. We ate lunch a lot together, and he would always say, like, there's one place down the road called Andrew's Atomic Hot Dogs. And he went, "Have you been to Andrew's Atomic?" And it's in a bad neighborhood. I said, "Yeah, I've been there a few times, Mike. Come on." And he goes, "Well, I'd like to go, but I'm a little afraid to go by myself." He's in his 80s. "Come on, we'll go there." So went and picked him up, took him there. Guys, Andrews says, "How you want your hot dog?" And he says, "I want chili and mustard and onions." That's it. And then he and later he said, "Can I have a knife?" And Andrew, this man, is an African American man, got him a knife. And he took off the chili, mustard, and onion and just ate the hot dog. And I went, "Well, what are you doing? Why did you order it that way?" I gave him a lot of crap, and he gave me a ton of crap.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah, he was a good guy that way. He was fun to kid around with. So,
One time, well, I'm going to stop you right now. One time, he and I were doing a writers' conference in Park City, Utah. He and I both. And I went in to teach a class one morning, and I had all these Western writers. They're from Utah, and they're from Wyoming, Idaho. And boy, I could just tell from the looks on their faces, they went, "Who is this idiot telling us?" I was in my 40s still. "We don't believe anything you say." And I was saying, you got to get to a conflict fast. Next day, same class, they come into class. They're sitting on the edge of their seat. And I went, "Okay, what's going on?" They went, "We had a class with Michael Curtis, and he said if you didn't get to the conflict in the first page, he was going to send back a rejection. So you were right." And when you damn right, I'm right. It's what he taught me. You get to it. You don't have time to say it was a dark and stormy night and go on forever. And then, oh man, this is bad. I had to do a reading there. This big crowd. He was in the crowd. I had brought all of his rejection letters to me, or a bunch of them, and I started reading his rejections. Then I read a story that he had taken. So I read him and read him and read him, and he was just staring at me. And he had he could be, a mean stare. I finished, and I said, "Now I'm going to read a story that Mr. Curtis took." And he yelled out from the audience, "I have all of your letters too." Like I've been
great.
lying to
Right.
him.
That's great. Well, that's cool that we have that connection.
Yeah, way to go.
Yeah, he was great. So talk to me about, getting short story collections published is getting harder all the time. So, like you mentioned, the Zonk was a great find for you, but you probably had a little bit of a rocky journey as far as finding people to publish your collections, right?
Yeah, this goes back to about 1988. An agent named Nat Sobel, who kind of reads everybody. I assume Nat's still alive, but he might be about 90. He reads literary journals, and he wrote me a letter. This is back in the day, and he said, "I've read your story blank, whatever it was, in some little Southwestern. Do you have a collection?" And I wrote him back, and I said, "Yes, I do," which I didn't, but um, I had maybe published 3 or 4 stories, and So I sent him the collection and he tried to sell it, you know. And then he said no one's going to buy it. And he had sent it down to, from the big presses down to smaller presses. No one took it. He said, I want you to, do you have a novel? And I said, I've written some novels that I don't like, but he says, well, write one, write another one. So I did. And boy, I was 6 months writing a novel, write a novel, write a novel. Um, and I sent it. And this is back in the day before internet or anything, so I had to go mail the manuscript to the post office. And I swear to God, Russell, I sent that thing out. I had my arm out in the mailbox, and boom, I got the rejection, before I could even pull my arm back. And he wrote, I don't like this novel, write another one. And that's when it kind of went, you don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna write what I want. So I continued writing. That was in 1988, and I wrote stories until, my first novel came out in 2004. So I wrote all these novels. And I was sending out to places like I was sending to some agents, no, no. And I sent to contests like the Drew Hines Award. Came in second place one time. That kind of pissed me off. No, 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 no. And then this little bitty press in Montgomery, Alabama. I happened to be down there teaching. I've been asked to come teach a class at a juvenile delinquent prison or something. And this man named Wayne Greenhaw was at this place called River City Press. Said, "Are you waiting on New York?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, send us something. I said, okay, what the hell? I did. And he took it. In a weird way, it was a wrong thing to do. I kind of got screwed over by them, but then NPR did a thing on me, and Harcourt bought the paperback, and all hell broke loose then. So then I was fine. And then after my agent, then I got an agent, I was with like Algonquin at this point. It was a really great press. And
Absolutely.
and then agent said, write another novel. I said no, and she said bye. I got another agent, and she placed two short story collections, which I thought was one short story collection, but it was 400 pages. And she said nobody's going to publish a 400-page collection of stories unless you're Joyce Carol Oates. So she placed two stories, and then she passed away early. Her name was Kit Ward, and she was a great woman. And then after that, I just said, I don't really need an agent anymore because, they're going to take 15% of nothing. I'm not making any money anymore. So it's been okay.
Do you have a new collection in the works?
It's funny that you should mention this. I just wrote. Okay, so okay, this is a long-winded story. Not that long-winded, I swear. My agent at Design, her name's Michelle Daughter, and she went, it's kind of about time for you to put out a new book. You got anything? And I went, yeah, I do, but I don't want to go on the road anymore. I don't want to, suddenly writers have to be their own publicists, excuse me. I don't want to do any of that. I'd do it posthumously. I don't give a damn. She said, okay, I understand. And then finally I wrote her back and said, okay, I'm ready. Here are 17 stories that have been published during the pandemic. Um, what do you think? And she wrote back, and Steve Gillis wrote and said, we kind of love this. This is great. We don't like the title. I had titled it from one of the stories. It was called I'm Down Here on the Floor. I thought it was a funny title. Glenda, my better half, said, is it an autobiography? Like, drunk on the floor all the time. So, yeah, I think we chose the title. I don't know. And then I hadn't heard back. It's been a month. So I just wrote her and said, am I going to get a contract or do y'all change your mind? And no offense if you did. It's not going to hurt my feelings because I don't really care anymore. I hadn't heard from her. So anyway, I think a new book is going to be called This Is Between Us. I think that's what it's called. But who knows? I still like I'm down here on the floor.
That's good. Yeah, Michelle's a good editor. I enjoyed working with her.
She's a great editor. I love her.
Yeah,
I really love her. I've had the
yeah.
good luck of working with Shannon Ravenel at Algonquin, a guy named Andre Bernard at Harcourt, and Michelle, daughter at Dzank. I I I've been lucky. You know, a lot of people go, there's some writers, maybe younger writers who go, this is how I wrote it, and nothing should change. Screw that. I
Yeah.
mean, if I bake a cake and it's terrible and everybody eats the cake and goes, golly, did you put sugar in this cake? Did you forget to put the sugar in the cake? You might want to put sugar in the cake. Editors are on your side.
Definitely. Anything else you want to bring up, George?
I want to bring up how there are some Montana writers that I love. One is Thomas McGuane. When I was just out of college, maybe my senior year in college, I started reading Thomas McGuane, but they were those those Florida Keys novels like Panama, 92 in the Shade, Bushwhack Piano, and in a weird way, Thomas McGuane, I got about 5 writers that I can say, ooh, these guys really helped me, or women. Thomas McGuane, Flannery O'Connor, Thomas Pynchon, of all people. But McGuane was big, and I love him. I assume he still lives in Montana. And pardon?
He's still here. Yeah.
Okay. And another great writer I like, but he's got some Southern roots, is Rick Bass. Do you know Rick Bass?
You.
Writes about the Yak Valley or whatever, but I think he might have lived in Mississippi. He's written some stories that took place in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And there's a great poet, Richard Hugo, that I loved. I hadn't read Richard Hugo in a while, but and when we're talking about Southern writing, all those writers are, as far as I'm concerned, they're just the same as Southern writers. I mean, it's like anything they write will, even though it might take place in Montana, it should resonate with the rest of the country. And that's what I kind of want to do is you might write about 45 South Carolina like I do, but I'm hoping that this will make someone in Maine go, damn, that's the same thing as here. Instead of high school football, we got hockey. Instead of deer hunting, we got moose hunting. It's just the same everywhere. Montana's got a slew of great writers, and I'm happy to know that.
Pretty lucky that way. Well, hey, George, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for
Russell, man,
taking the time.
It's great seeing you. Tell me, what is this going to be? Hey, let me ask you this. Is this podcast going to be radio only, or are they going to see you and me?
Just audio.
Good. I wouldn't have taken a shower if I knew that.
I should have warned you. Hey, thanks a lot, man.
Hey, buddy, it's great. It's great meeting you.
You too. I hope we get a chance to hang out one of these days. That'd be fun.
I look forward to reading your novel.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Down. Yeah. Had it upside down like Trump holds a Bible.
Right. Hilarious. All right. Have a good one, man.
All right, buddy. Be warm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Song of Roland. I want to thank George Singleton for agreeing to talk to me today. And you can find his books pretty much everywhere books are sold. I encourage you to frequent your independent booksellers. I want to thank my son Fletcher for some of the transitional music, and for the next episode I'm going to be interviewing Lori Sargent, who is a rock musician from Boston and is the founder of the Billy Conway Artist Fund, which is a scholarship for Indigenous artists. Thanks again for joining me here on Song of Roland.